Glad Trevor has all of this under control because
And hello. Well, now, curiously, this says the stream's been going live for 23 hours, 58 minutes, and 44 seconds, which I suspect is not the case. Anyway, hello, everybody. Welcome to Raise2Launch. If you've been watching it for a whole day, my goodness, get out more. Otherwise, I have here on channel Tomas Holcher from Raise2Launch. I've got Alberto Mujica. I pronounced it correctly that time. Also, part of Raise2Launch and Scale Up Legal. I, of course, am Trevor from Crowd Tamers. We're here to talk today about uh, growing across borders and how it can seem convenient and intelligent to launch in more than one location. And there are times when it is, there's times where it's not, but there's a lot of things you need to answer if you're running a business in Europe or in Asia and you want to launch in the US, or even if you're in the US and you want to launch in a new state or something. I think we'll go first with, as you're doing this, I think the first big question you have to answer before you decide on company culture and marketing and ops and like all of these things is just what reasons might we have from a purely legal corporate background to say, hey, I want an office if I'm in Europe, I want a new office in the US, or if I'm in the US, I want another new corporate entity somewhere. Like, what reasons might I have, Alberto, to build a new structure on top of the one I already have?
well, first it depends on what structure you currently have,
Hmm.
right? So in reality, it's not so much what you want to achieve, but what do the laws state that you need to do to what the laws state that you need to do in order to be compliant to achieve what you want to achieve. So, if you've got, the United States has this interesting system where you've got really two headquarters, where you incorporate and where you actually operate. So, it makes sense if you're raising money to incorporate in Delaware. Why? Because of jurisprudence, because of all of these things, and we discussed these in a prior podcast. But I mean, there's lots of reasons to incorporate in Delaware, and that's why you see so many companies incorporating in Delaware. But you may not operate out of, you operate out of California because that's where Silicon Valley is, or Florida because the taxes are great there, or anywhere else for any reason. You just happen to be in Illinois. Well, that's where you operate out of. So you may incorporate in Delaware, and you need to register your foreign entity in any other state where you are, right? Or where you have operations. Some places, unless some states require you to register your foreign entity if you meet a certain threshold. In different states, it's different. It's whether you're operating there, whether you have employees there, whether you're generating revenue from there, whether you have X number of customers. It varies from state to state. But that's really what's going to determine whether you register your foreign entity into a state, or if you even, if you're setting up a small business, let's say, I don't know, a bakery or something, you may don't even have to worry about any of that. You set up your LLC to protect your assets, and you set it up in your state, and you don't have to worry about any foreign entity registrations or anything like that. But if you're planning a national to have a national enterprise or even an international multinational enterprise, these things are things that you want to consider and are important as you develop your corporate strategy. So I hope I answered that.
So I think there's part of
Yeah,
it, right?
I
There's
mean,
a couple of different ways you can build, right? You can say, hey, in your examples, right? If I've got a bakery, I'm not doing much complicated with my bakery unless I work for the mafia or something. I'm just going to produce my carbohydrates and sell them. But as you get to more complex business sorts, right? If you're doing $1 million a year in an e-com drop shipping business, like you
right.
might say, hey, I'm physically my office might be in Illinois, but all my product comes into California because that's the coast closest to where it's coming from. I might want to incorporate over there to have an entity there to be where all my employees who are doing receiving or whatever are. But as you're building your different types of business, you and I mentioned in the pre-call, right? Subsidiary can come in a couple different flavors. Then you also mentioned something I'd never heard of before, which is serial LLCs and how you can build these up instead. Um, One thing to consider also, I was doing some free consulting with a company in advance of possibly doing some paid consulting for them. They're like, "Hey, we'll give some equity," and they showed me like 9 different properties they have, and I said, "Hey, who owns what property? Because if you give me equity in one entity, does it like am I getting in all of these? Are these all separate? Like just as an employee, you can begin to have some questions about, hey, I'm working somewhere with 3 different websites that they develop. What's the corporate structure behind all of these, right? So talk to me a bit about the different common types of corporate structures that you see and why you might want to adopt any of those.
Okay, to start, we'll go with the difference between subsidiaries and registrations of
Okay.
foreign entities. So you've got in the example, you're based in Illinois, you're importing something into California, and then from there it's going all over the place. So, but you still have a bunch of employees in California, a bunch of employees in Illinois, and your customers are everywhere else.
Right.
You are likely to you might if you're not raising any capital and you happen to you might be incorporated in Illinois and you may have you may register your Illinois company in California, which is different
Okay.
from having a subsidiary in California,
Okay.
um, or register your entity in anywhere else that may be because you have too many customers in that state. You are required to register your foreign entity there, right? Let's say I don't know Texas, right? You have a big operation in California and Illinois, but a lot of your customers are for some reason in Texas. Texas, you may have, and I don't know Texas law, but I know that some states have a threshold based on the revenue that you generate from that state. So let's imagine that Texas has such a law. In that case, you would have your Illinois entity registered in California as a foreign entity and in Texas as a foreign entity. So that's one thing which is separate and different from subsidiaries and LLC series, right? Um, Subsidiaries are literally different corporations, different entities that are owned by either partially or wholly by the parent entity. And that's mostly, to with the intention of isolating risks and business units. Also, it's often used to create joint ventures uh, where it's not a wholly owned subsidiary, but instead it's a, uh, a jointly owned subsidiary with another business for the for some strategic reason that they want to do a joint venture. Um, and those are completely different entities, completely separate entities that are owned by either each other fully or in part. And then the series LLC is a different thing entirely because the LLC series, which is the most modern corporate entity that exists, it's fairly new. It's Delaware is really the pioneer in the subject, but there are other states that have LLC series, and those are you have an LLC, and you can create sub LLCs without the necessity of a lot of the red tape of having to register and do all of these things. But it's a way for you to once again isolate your liabilities from one business to another, often used with funds that are going to make different kinds of investments, and they don't want the liabilities to to blend into one another.
Okay. It doesn't
So,
seem super different to me than just a subsidiary. What's the point of a series versus a subsidiary?
well, for example, in Delaware, you can have a registered series or you can have a protected series. The protected series, you don't even have to register it with the state. You update it in your operating agreement. And that's it. So it's a lot cheaper. You can create them and destroy them quickly. And it allows you to isolate these so long as you're following several other procedural things, right?
Ah, okay.
But you can create these and isolate your liabilities that way,
Gotcha.
versus having to register it and pay the annual fee and who owns it and all these things. With the series now, you can have a registered series, and if you have a registered series, then these are public. They're known. Okay, this is this is an LLC that is a series of this other LLC.
I got it.
So those are shown, and you have to pay fees and whatever for each of
I
those
get it. I have
registrations.
heard about when you're in real estate investment, every building should be its own LLC. So this is like a really easy
Absolutely,
way to say, I don't even have to register with the state. I have one LLC and holds all the sub LLCs. Away we go. I get it.
exactly. It's often used for that and for funds as well. Yeah,
Gotcha. So not really something that is super relevant to a lot of the like most of the startups who are listening to Raise to Launch are not going to be building a series LLC for themselves, but they may bump into them as they work with a VC who has built one for themselves.
and as they grow, hopefully they'll grow into something where isolating these risks or these liabilities makes sense.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So I think that is like the legal reason, and you come into this quite a few times, right? Any given LLC, provided you aren't indulging in enough malfeasance to pierce the corporate veil, every LLC is distinct and independent from the other ones. So you are saying, hey, this much risk is bucketed here, and I can put something else in here, two different bunches of assets. And if something goes wrong in this arrangement, they can't get over here to get the money out of this bit. So that's the real
Exactly.
reason why you're building all these LLCs is it gives you the security of I don't have all of my eggs in one metaphorical basket.
Exactly. You're siloing your risks, and
Okay.
there's major advantages to that. When it comes to deciding how you want to proceed. I mean, this is a riskier business than that, and I don't want it to mix in, right? So
Got it. So and we have not yet released the Launch Today podcast uh, about legal tech, legal structures you and I talked about, but risk reduction is a big part of why you talk to lawyers in the first place. So that's I think one area of what you have to think about when you are building out a consideration of legal entities is if I'm spinning up a legal entity in this location, it is because I want to mitigate the risk that is attached to this location and all the business that happens there. But more than just risk reduction, there is like building a company. There is finding culture and values and how you want to actually operate the people part of the business less than the risk and the structure part. That comes to you, Tomas, I think, right? You've obviously dealt with companies and you help bring some overseas into the US. What do you have to share with somebody who says, hey, I'm based somewhere abroad and I want to make it so that I can open up an office in the US? What should they be thinking about?
Yeah, thanks for asking, and it was good to listen to all the legal things on the. It's more structured, and on people's side, I think there's a lot more freedom there. But with freedom, there's a little bit of a risk because it's very easy to create a satellite office or create another location, and that location feels isolated from your core business activities. So that's what, as a business owner, you need to focus on right away. How can I make sure if that's a one person operation in another country, in the US, for example, how that person will not feel isolated? How can I bridge this? And the bridging is a good word from a culture perspective. So maybe a few hands-on tips right away. Is that person a strategic person or a tactical person? Meaning, is that person is going to bring you strategic advantage and gonna give you input from that country, or this person just gonna help you execute from a tactical point of view?